Go, you who see the need to help a people steely strong and brave, who are fighting for their freedom, their homes, their very lives. So that in freedom they shall walk the sunny soil of Spain. In freedom till their vineyards. In freedom, with all the strength of bursting energy, build a new and happy Spain. Salute and honor volley.
And honor volley 3 times.
In 1936, 19-year-old Canadian Jules Pavio, along with hundreds of other Canadian volunteers, journeyed to Spain to defend the Republic against the rise of fascism. Half of these men would never return home. Today, historian Norm Christie has come back to the battlefields of Spain to uncover the truth behind one of the nation's darkest mysteries, the fate of those missing volunteers, whose stories have remained buried for more than half a century.
This is a burial ground in a little village called Uclas, 100 kilometers south of Madrid. And the people here are exhuming the remains of Republican soldiers killed in the Spanish Civil War 70 years ago. Cemeteries like this and these exhumations are the grim realities of war, and they're something you don't get from looking at pristine cemeteries. It's when you're looking at these skulls and these skeletons that you know what the cost of war really is. The Spanish Civil War involved 40,000 international volunteers, including 1,500 Canadians. Half of those men were killed, and none of them have a grave. These people have simply vanished.
Today, Spain is a progressive democratic nation, open and free. But just below the peaceful surface lie the reminders of a deeply troubled past, a story of terror and oppression that began over 70 years ago. July 17, 1936, fascist nationalists, aided by the military, launch a surprise coup against the Democratic Republic of Spain.
Viva España!
But the uprising is only partly successful. The fascists claim scattered parts of the country, while the Republicans retain the rest, including the capital, Madrid. The stage is now set for what will become one of the most savage civil wars of the 20th century. In September 1936, General Francisco Franco emerges as the leader of the fascist forces, and by the end of October, he has led his armies to the outskirts of Madrid.
This is the Gran Via in Madrid, and today, as in 1936, it's the heart of a vibrant city. It was also the center of the Republican cause, and the fascists knew that to win the war quickly, they would have to capture Madrid. And to do this, they started a terror bombing program using the Condor Legion, which was Hitler's contribution to the fascist cause. But rather than terrorize the population, he increased their will to resist.
For months, Madrid has been a city of terror. Day and night, death, sudden and frightful, stalks the Spanish capital. The drone of planes starts the panic-stricken populace rushing to shelter. Before their eyes, they've seen whole families wiped out by the insurgents' bomb-dropping sky raiders. The coming of the new year promises only desolation for stricken Madrid.
Brutal conflict catches the world's attention. Images of the devastation wrought by the fascists raise a call to arms throughout the West, and soon thousands of idealistic volunteers are signing up and sailing for Spain.
You You saw in the newsreels the bombardment, the shelling of Madrid, and the people running into shelter, getting killed on the streets. This was fighting and aggression, a danger in the world. This really affected me. When you saw these newsreels, you wanted to do something. Here is a people that are suffering under an attack. What can you do to help these people? When the opportunity arose, I went. 35,000 of us that went there from different ethnic backgrounds, religious, political, a lot of writers and artists, so on. But all were anti-fascists.
These raw recruits are organized into units known as the International Brigades, ragtag bands of civilian idealists and socialists with one common goal: to fight the rising tide of fascism.
By the fall of 1936, the fascists had captured most of southwestern Spain and were ready for their assault on Madrid. Their plan was to attack the western outskirts of Madrid, capture the city, and end the war. In fact, from here you get a clear view of the Manzanares River Valley, and this is where the fascists were going to launch their attack. And they did so on November the 8th, 1936. With great success at the start, they started to push their way into the city, and this caused great panic. It looked like Madrid was going to fall and that the war could be over. And just at the nick of time, a new group of troops arrived, the men of the International Brigades, and they were here to save Madrid.
The Internationals add 3,500 desperately needed combatants to the defense of Madrid, bringing with them a significant boost to Republican morale. Their cries of "No pasarán," meaning they shall not pass, inspire fellow defenders. For nearly a week, Spaniards and Internationals fight side by side, defending Madrid. But the inexperience of the volunteers takes its toll. During this time, 1 in 3 of the men known as Los Brigadistas is killed.
This is the pharmacy building in the University of Madrid. And in 1936, this campus became a battleground. In fact, you can see scars of the old fighting up on the brickwork near the top of those buildings. That's where the snipers were, and of course they would exchange fire with the men on the ground. There's more evidence of the battles over here. On November 15, 1936, the Moors and the Spanish Legion came across the Manzanares River and stormed into the campus. And it was here that some of the most ferocious fighting of the Spanish War took place. You can actually see some of the damages here. This is actually bullet holes in granite, all left over from 1936. You can see bullet holes in the regular brick up here. When the Moors and the Spanish Legion came across, the International Brigades were ordered to repel them. Really hand-to-hand battles from basement, floor to floor. The Internationals finally stopped the fascist attack, but with very heavy casualties. Roughly half the men in the battle were either killed or wounded.
After 14 days of battle, Republican forces succeed in turning back the fascists, but the cost of defending the capital is terrible. Over 10,000 lives have been lost, including 2,000 men of the fledgling International Brigades. Today, little evidence of their sacrifice remains. Only a few scattered bullet holes and shell scars. By the end of November 1936, Franco accepts that Madrid cannot be taken. He begins preparations for a new offensive, one that will bring in the new year with the blood of tens of thousands of men. Among them, many newly arrived internationals, receiving their baptism of fire at the Battle of Hirama. The Hirama River Valley, a quiet, picturesque region of central Spain. Close inspection, though, reveals scars of a violent past. Scattered traces of a terrible battle, one that would transform the valley into a vast, unmarked grave of the Spanish Civil War. February 6, 1937, the Hirama River Valley erupts in withering fire. As 40,000 soldiers of the fascist army launch a new offensive. It's here in the killing fields of Hirama where the 450 American, Cuban, Irish, and Canadian volunteers of the Abraham Lincoln Battalion receive their bloody baptism of fire.
So, Sevi, what do you think these are? Is that a human bone?
It could be. I don't know. A doctor can say that.
Well, check them out. We'll take them to the
Okay.
archaeologist.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the Battle of the Lincoln Battalion on February 27th, 1937. Now, they started from these positions?
Yes, and they have to attack against the fascist line, who is on the west, in the skyline.
So basically, they got up. This is their first battle as a unit, and they've got to go up this rise. And
Yes.
they were unsupported in the attack.
Yes, the fascist machine gun.
Just shoot them down.
It was a murder.
In certain trench sections along the line, whole groups of men would barely reach the top of the parapets before being smashed back into the trenches by withering fire. Each time the pitiful line rose to continue the advance, the deadly cross and direct fire of whole batteries of guns cut into them, thinning their ranks, so that entire squads and sections were melting away in death and agony.
So they never had a chance. My understanding is they had 450 men, and out of those 450 men, 127 were killed
Yeah.
in that short attack. Do you know how far they got? Or were they...
No, they got 100 meters far from the trenches, but they can advance more. It was very, very unsuccessful.
It had been the bloodiest battle so far in the war, and it brought the end to the Battle of Hirama.
Yes.
Of the 127 men of the Abraham Lincoln Battalion killed, at least 9 were Canadians. Men like Joseph Campbell, Fred Lackey, and George Laskowski, all lost in their first day of battle. In total, the fighting claims the lives of over 10,000 men from both sides, for little or no gain. Today, the vast majority of those killed remain where they fell, lost among the thousands of dead left unclaimed and unmarked on the battlefields of Hirama.
So you said that there were a number of brigadistas buried here who were killed in Hirama.
Yes, 2,000 soldiers, Spaniards and foreigners that were buried in this site of
on this side here.
Yes, at the end of the war, Franco ordered to remove all the remains of the bodies. It was a friend of mine, François Massou, a French brigadista from Oloron-Saint-Marie, that came here in '86 in order to discover where his comrades fallen in the battle. He discovered that the remains of the body were put in that corner of the cemetery.
Over here?
See, as a rubbish, yes. At the end, François Massou got to put this memorial.
What does it say?
Well, in the memory of the heroes, fighters, anti-fascists, Spaniards and foreigners of the international brigades that who in the Battle of Hirama gave their lives for the cause of freedom of Spain and Europe and the world. More than 2,000 bodies are inside this place.
So why did it take so long for them to recognize these people?
Well, because under the dictatorship of Franco, it was not possible to remember these guys.
How many thousands of other ones are buried in unknown or unmarked graves from the Republican side?
Thousands and thousands of people. You know that there are a lot of graves, common mass graves, in many, many places of Spain.
The Battle of Hirama ends in a stalemate, and the valley is once again quiet. But as 1937 wears on, fascist attacks all over Spain claim tens of thousands more Republican lives. Many are the volunteers of the international brigades, men who came to Spain to fight for their ideals, but soon find themselves fighting for their lives.
By the spring of 1937, the line had stabilized around Madrid, and the defense of Madrid had bought a lot of time for the Republican army to form up, to get reinforcements, to get some armaments, and by July 1937, they were ready to launch their first major offensive of the war, and they chose to launch the attack 40 kilometers west of Madrid against the fascist positions near Brunetti. Right now, we're trying to find the jump-off position of the Lincoln Battalion for the Battle of Brunetti. And the Lincolns and the Washingtons contained a lot of the new arrivals, a lot of the Americans and Canadians. So for most of these guys, this was going to be their first taste of battle. Very few had a military background. These are men who deeply believed in the cause, sincerely believed in the cause, and were willing to give their lives for Spain and for the fight against the fascists.
For days, the men of the 15th International Brigade maintain a non-stop assault. They overrun the fascists, defending the small towns and villages of the Guadarrama River Valley, advancing at last to the foot of their final objective, a key nationalist position known as Mosquito Ridge.
This is the infamous Mosquito Ridge, and it was a main fascist position during the Battle of Brunetti. But you can see around us, you can hear the pile drivers and the earth movers. It's now vanishing into history itself, another lost site of the Spanish Civil War. But in 1937, this was a critical position. Mosquito Ridge gives a commanding view of the entire attacking force. So the advantage from this position was clearly with the fascists. So when the Americans and Canadians came across this valley here, they met heavy, heavy fire and took terrible casualties. One of the men in the attack was Jules Pavio with the Lincoln Battalion.
This looks like the top of the ridge where we attacked that day. The fire was very heavy, machine gun and rifle fire from over across this deep valley here. We were trying to go and get with the tanks up to the top of the ridge there and cut that highway. Fear doesn't come into it. You get keyed up when you go into battle like that. You fire and then run and drop down and fire again and run and then dive in. The firing was going above my head. So I thought, well, I got to get back to rejoin the battalion here. They were trying to get me, of course. And I finally made that final run up to here and yelling, don't fire, here, it's Jules. And there was a Japanese American with his head up, and as I was diving into there, he got hit right in there. You could just see the thing forming there. It was awful, but you know, it's so vivid when you see this. This fellow was a cook. He wanted to get to the front where he can do some fighting. So here he was in the first attack, and he got killed. After that, we were taken to try and cut the highway. We got into a hollow on the riverbed, and we got bombed. The bombing was so heavy, I can always recall trying to hang on to the tufts of grass. When I got back to Canada even, I'd hear planes coming over, and I'd go diving for the ditch, you know, that panic. Sudden panic feeling, and it took years to subside. We had to then start moving back, but Moors started attacking us. It's an honor to die for Allah, so they keep coming at you. They won't stop. Now I'll have to use that bayonet. And I was wondering, I'm a peaceful guy, how am I gonna, kill a guy with a bayonet? So this is the kind of experience you have. You don't know how you're going to react, but you're going to do it. We killed quite a few, and we held those trenches until we saw that we were going to get annihilated.
On July 26th, after 20 days of fighting, the Republicans abandoned the battleground, leaving behind a devastated plain littered with thousands of bodies, including 24 Canadians, a third of all the Canadian volunteers who fought in the battle. But the volunteers of the international brigades have little time to recover as the Republican leaders are planning their next move, another massive offensive, this time in northern Spain. The advance begins on August 23rd, and over the course of the following week, the Brigadista attack and capture enemy positions across the Aragon front. By the beginning of September, the internationals are ready to turn their sights on their next objective, the heavily fortified village of Belchite.
This is St. Augustine's Church, or what remains of St. Augustine's Church in Belchite. And it was attacked by the Lincoln Battalion in September 1937. And they managed to break through the back door here of the church and force the fascists out through this area here. And you can see the damage of this place, like the shell holes, bullet holes. It's been destroyed in the fighting. As the Lincolns moved through the church, they forced the fascists out into the courtyard. And as they broke out, they got more resistance. One of the stories from the period is where Jim Wolfe from Vancouver was coming out through here, and he was hit by a grenade. It hit him in the face, and as he lay dying, he gave his cigarettes to a friend because he had no more use for them. But as you can see out here, taking the church was just the first phase. Belchite was a fascist stronghold. It was like a fortress, not a village. The fighting was house to house. It was bayonet, it was grenade, it was hand to hand. The men had to go in with a big ram, break the door open, clear the house, try to punch a hole through to the other house, and move one at a time. But you can see in this town how difficult this would have been. There was no escape for the fascists. They had to fight. They were fanatical fighters, and they weren't going to give an inch. One particular house gave the Lincolns great problems. They took a drum of fuel, rolled it into the house, and ignited it. And as they fought and tried to move down these streets, there were snipers, machine gun fire, constant incoming artillery, and it took them 6 days to take it.
My guards were so tired that they only woke when grenades were thrown up the alley in the early hours of the morning. Beautiful music floated over the city, followed by rifle and machine gun fire and grenade explosions. A short silence, and then a terrific bombardment of hand grenades thrown at our barricade. The whole night was like a fantastic melodrama. Weird, beautiful, dangerous, and delightful. Because we knew victory was ours.
This place is a remarkable memorial to the Spanish Civil War. It's incredible to think what took place here 6 days in September 1937. It reminds you of the streets of Ypres or maybe Dresden or Stalingrad. It just is a perfect monument to the fighting that took place. There's even a nice little piece up here where you have an unexploded shell embedded in the church tower. It's just absolutely phenomenal. When Franco first left this place as is, it was a propaganda piece to show the barbarism of the Republicans. But what he really created was a remarkable memorial to the suffering of war.
To this day, the casualty figures at Belchite remain unknown. One source claims that after the attack, fewer than 100 men were left standing. Today, the only tributes to their sacrifice are the crumbling walls and ruins of the battle-scarred village. The battle for Belchite marks the beginning of the end of the Republican offensive. And on March 9th, 1938, Franco launches a counteroffensive, decimating the Republican army as it retreats, spawning a new wave of violence that will claim thousands of lives, with thousands more simply vanishing.
In March 1938, the fascists launched a major offensive in the Aragon, and they broke through the Republican lines. In fact, they routed the Republican army. And the situation was desperate, and they threw in a lot of new reinforcements into the battle to try to stop the fascist advance. And Jules, you joined in that attack to try to stop the fascist advance.
Yes, I did, yes.
It's really a rout. It's more than a retreat, isn't it? They're really driving hard against the Republican forces.
It was chaos.
And that's the position you were in when you set up your machine guns at the end of March.
Yes.
What we're going to do is we're going to try to find the position that you went into on that night.
Yes.
So here's the crossroads that we just went across.
Yes.
So according to the histories, you guys were pushed out into this area here. That ridge right over there on the left?
Could be.
Yeah,
Could
that's
be.
where you were probably in front of that. So Jules, does this look like it?
Yes, this looks more like it. Some pine trees here. What happened, as I was getting the machine gun crew into place, they were doing some digging. I saw these two soldiers, and I wanted to find out who they were beside us. Were they the right brigades that we were told? So as I walked over to the two soldiers, they put the guns at me. Manos arriba, put your hands up. I yelled to them, fire, these are fascists, tiras, fascistas. They jumped up in behind me and led me back with the rifles through the woods into a little hollow. And there was Carl Geiser and the other 14, 15 guys with him. We were marched down the highway, down that slope, until we reached the farmhouse and brigade or divisional headquarters of the Italians.
What we're going to do is we're going to go down the road and try to find where that farmhouse is or where it would have been.
Yes,
we don't know
let's
if it's
try.
still there today.
Yeah.
So you can tell us the rest of the story, which is was quite an incredible story.
Yes, all right.
Hey, Jules.
Okay.
So come on over here.
Yeah.
So let's carry on with your story.
We came down this road and we were brought to this farm. They quickly lined us up against the wall. And they formed the firing squad. You feel you have to die like a brigadista. And so we were getting ready to sing the International.
So you're
and we're
bracing
ready.
yourself.
We're bracing ourselves, okay. And then black limousine comes down the road. They stopped. They saw something happening here, called over to the officer in charge and asked what he was doing. And he says, we're killing these Reds. Oh, these are internationals. No, we want to capture them. They wanted to exchange them. A miracle has happened. You know, there is a great feeling of joy and release. And that's when we were then put into the cattle cars and taken to Burgos.
So do you recognize it?
Yes, I do. This we spent a lot of time here. Brings back memories.
Now, you said there was about 500
About 500
international
of us, yeah.
brigaders, and there were a lot of Canadians with you?
There was about 20 of us, yeah, Canadians.
Did you fear for your life? Did you think you were okay, or did you still think there was an element of danger in being here?
Oh, well, you never know. Yeah, we didn't know if they were, but you don't think of it, you know. You're trying to make life interesting and worthwhile and eat enough so you survive. There was two guards, Sticky and Tanky. Tanky had been wounded by the British, and he really hated them. Sticky just liked to swing his stick and break them on the backs of the prisoners, us coming down, especially to the meals, running through the gauntlet. So he had a whip made out of bull's penis with lead weights on the ends. So that made him happy. It didn't break, and he could swing it, and it lasted a long time. But it wasn't all bad. I recall us preparing for the Christmas concert. We invited the officers and the camp commandant. Just to see those Germans, their German choir, to sing there the bell song and the low sings, the hum, and then into powerful singing. It was so thrilling, tears came into your eyes. Everybody stood up, ole, ole. And the guards and the prisoners, we were like one. We were patting each other on the back. And it was just that feeling of that, you know, humanity, you know, finally, the beauty of just being able to do that. These Germans didn't expect to have a life afterwards. They were going to be sent back into concentration camp, probably executed. So, but they could sing like this. As a matter of fact, the three German international officers were executed here, and the grave is somewhere outside the wall. I wonder if we can find it.
Yeah, we're gonna ask the priest to
Yes.
see if we can try to find where the graves were.
Yes. All right. Oh, yes, this is it.
That's where you're held?
Yes. Yeah, we were on the second and third floors. I know I was on the 3rd floor. 2nd floor is where we had the Christmas concert. Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
This is the graveyard.
Is this the graveyard? Yeah.
Here we go up here.
Yeah.
These are the graves.
Hey, están aquí.
Los que morían aquí o eran fusilados fueron enterrados ahí, cada uno en su tumba, no aquí, sino afuera, a la esquina del edificio y junto al árbol ese nogal.
Just here, on this lawn here, Jules, is where the people who were shot here were buried. But they moved the graves. They brought the bones out, and they're now buried here, under where we are.
I see, yeah.
So, the International Brigade and also the Spanish fighters, they're all here.
They're all buried here, eh? So, and how many would there have been?
That's 2025, including Spanish and international.
I see. Well, that's quite a few that died here anyway, yeah.
Grazie.
Okay.
So this is the graves that they got. This is what's left of them.
Yes, imagine, yeah.
How do you feel when you think about these people?
Well, I feel very sad, that this would have had to happen. They were great fighters and officers, but that's what the fascists did, after all. They, at the front, they executed us as fast as they could. I was one of the lucky ones.
Jules Pavio endures the hardship of the Burgos prison camp for over a year, until his release and return to Canada in 1939. For Pavio, the war is over. But for the remaining volunteers of the International Brigades, who continue the fight, the worst days of the Spanish Civil War are yet to come. Throughout the spring of 1938, the fascists continue their assault on Republican forces. But in July, the Republicans muster their remaining strength and embark on one last offensive against the nationalists in the hope of stopping Franco's advance.
We're driving to the Pandols Mountains in Catalonia, and it was the scene of the great fighting during the Ebro Offensive in the summer of 1938. The International Brigades were moving forward, advancing towards their old failures at Gandesa. And there, they'd run into big trouble.
Over the next few weeks, the Brigadists launch a series of all-out attacks on the superior fascist force. But the offensive quickly withers, and they're forced to withdraw through the mountains west of Gandesa.
I'm with Miquel, and we're going to go up this valley and find a monument to the Brigadistas Internacionales that was put up in 1938. Miquel, this area was used by the Republicans in 1938. Tell me about the pass we're taking up to the top.
Sí, es el único sitio que existe para poder acceder a la Sierra de Pandols por esta zona de aquí. Entonces, como el ataque fascista era por la zona del norte, fueron retirándose y este es el único camino que existe para llegar a la carretera y seguir. Y vamos a encontrar un monumento dedicado a las brigadas internacionales que es único y exclusivo en España.
So let's go up and find it. You can lead.
Okay.
So, Tell me what this is.
En la misma batalla del Ebro por las brigadas internacionales.
So it was built by the very same international brigaders in the battle.
But to do this, I mean,
Yeah.
this is a true love for your comrades, for your fallen comrades.
Sí.
Can you actually read what that says? Can you translate that? I know it's hard to read, but...
In memory of the fighters, the Spanish and international fighters.
De la brigada.
From the brigade.
Te recuerda el ejército español.
With the Spanish army remembers you.
Viva la República.
Long live the Republic.
But this looks like an individual grave. Egan
Smith.
Schmidt.
Smith, de Latvia, caído el 19 de agosto de 1938. Ofensiva Ebro.
This is the only individual grave to an international or even a Republican soldier that I've seen the whole time we've been researching this. So these bodies have to be in the valleys or on the ridges somewhere. I mean, there's no graves for this war. It's like it's the only war where no one got killed. You've got the bunkers, you've got the trenches, you've got the tunnels, you've got all sorts of evidence of war. But you don't have any cemetery.
Durante 40 años que han estado pegando palo, todo el mundo tiene que olvidar.
See, for 40 years after Franco won the war, they were made to forget. There were fascist brigades who were sent out to find bodies and any vestige of the war and hide them, take them away and bury them and forget about them. The monument was kind of hidden.
Y el que lo conocía no ha dicho nada.
These internationals, they came to Spain to help out. These are very brave men. They gave their lives for the cause of fighting fascism. Don't you think they deserve something a little bit more than this?
Cada país tendría que tener su memorial de sus propios hombres.
Yeah, every country should have their own monument to their own men who fell here.
It's amazing. Fantastic, though.
On August 26th, the battered 15th International Brigade staggers down from the Pandols Mountains, and in September the surviving brigadista are reluctantly sent home. For them, the bloody 3-year war is over, but they leave behind 15,000 fallen comrades. Most still lay on the battlefields where they were cut down, their memory lost in defeat and later erased by a fanatical victor.
The fascist victory in 1939 brought about 40 years of dictatorship in Spain under Francisco Franco. To the victor go the spoils and the right to write history and to raise memorials to their fallen. And this is Franco's memorial to his fallen. This is the Basilica of the Valley of the Fallen, and it's part of the memorial to the 200,000 fascist dead of the Spanish Civil War. In 1975, General Franco was buried here, and it's a very impressive monument, and the basilica is surmounted by a giant cross that overlooks the Valley of the Fallen, which was a battlefield of the Spanish Civil War. Before the vanquished, there were years of persecution, and their dead lay for decades in unmarked graves. I'm with Maximo Molina, who's the director of the dig here at Uclas. So can you tell me what you've got here?
We have the burial place from the people who were killed by Franco's dictatorship. In here, for example, in this grave, there were 5 people who had been shot dead. After being shot, they were shot on the head. That's the way we identify the people who were shot dead, executed, that's right.
Were any of these graves marked?
There was nothing here to say that this is a cemetery until 1988.
On a personal side, your grandfather was shot
Yeah,
during the
that's
Civil
right.
War. And is that what brought you in? Or was it something else?
No, it's that what brought me in directly. He was found and taken out of the place he had hidden in, and he was shot dead the very same morning. It's pretty unfair that all these people, either soldiers or Republicans who were killed, have been forgotten for so long.
Explain to me the split in Spain about uncovering the history of the Spanish Civil War.
Well, basically, the ones who won the war, obviously, they got their disease back. They were exhumed with public money, and they got many benefits from Franco's government, Franco supporters. On the other hand, the Republicans, the one who lost the war, they got nothing. They got their families badly buried and forgotten, and in places that have no dignity, or even in the middle of the country or the side of the roads.
There must be around 200,000 missing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Are you going to find them all?
Oh, I wish I could.
So do you have anything to say to these men?
To these men? I don't know. Is that we are trying to get them back the dignity they never lost, is what I would tell them. Bringing a little bit of justice to these people who have been forgotten. And then trying to close, for once and definitely, the wounds from the Civil War that are still opening. This is something we have to face. If we don't face the past, how on earth are we going to look at the future?